OMG Maria Uria Uwe. The God has given Camido blessing because I don't know what it takes to remove someone like Stonebwoy at #1, but it looks like the blessing from the girl no that's helped Camido. So there you have it. Camido is the latest king of the chart this week, and that is all that time could do for us. Thank you for hanging out with me and jamming to the songs. But remember, if you don't have any of these songs on your playlist, first of all, you and I are not friends, all right? But you still have two options. You either update it or you delete it, okay? All right, so until I come your way same time next week, my name still remains Emmanuel Sapo. You know where to find me on social media at Olele Salvador. And hey, enjoy the rest of your day. Don't forget to keep watching Citi TV. Why? Because it is your world. See ya.
And welcome to another edition of the Voters Diary. My name is Vivian Kai Lokko. Thank you so much for joining us on another one. Today we'll be looking at manifestos. They've become a big thing in our body politic. The two political parties now talking about their manifestos, back and forth over that. And even smaller parties also talking about the manifestos. But what really are manifestos, and are they necessary now? And should we be looking at that, or rather the real things being done by political parties? And as the NDC prepares to launch its manifesto in a number of hours, we're looking at what to look out in that manifesto. I'll be right back to introduce to you my guests for today. Don't go away. Hey, welcome back to the Voters Diary. You can join this conversation, send us a message, and always add hashtag Voters Diary, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, or on our WhatsApp lines that will scroll in a bit on your TV sets. But let me introduce the gentleman that I'll be having today's discussion with. I have with me the head of research at Citi TV and Citi FM, Nathan Kwao. Nathan, welcome. Yes. You've not been here since we started Voters Diary. You've been at the other side, the radio side. Yes. Now we're seeing you. Welcome. And then I have Kojo Akoto. He's been with us from day one, and he's still with us today. Kojo Akoto, welcome.
Thank you, Vivian, and welcome to Nathan.
Kojo is also the head of new media here at Citi FM and Citi TV. So, gentlemen, welcome. Today, we want to zero in on the manifesto. Later, we'll look at the 2004 elections, which we got to. But today, and as the week goes, we'll be on the manifesto conversation for a bit, especially because we are seeing some interesting developments around the manifestos. But let's start with the manifesto in general. Really, when we talk about manifestos, what are we talking about?
Well, essentially, we are talking about the things that a political party would want to do should it gain power in an election. Essentially, a plan on how they want to develop a country or a particular space or whatever it is. So essentially, it's just a compendium of their ideas, plans, projects, whatever it is they want to do to better the lot of the electorate whose votes they seek. In our context, of course, it cuts across political parties. So ever since we started having elections since the 50s, or for the more modern times, since 1992, manifestos have always been part of our conversations. The political parties, in those documents, whether small or large, they tell us what they want to do. If you hand them power for a period, they will
more the promises.
Yes, more like promises and their plans for the country. So essentially, that's what manifestos are. And some people have called it a bit of a contract. But if you look at the conversation from a certain point, it is a contract, agreed, but that contract is even in existence even before manifestos come in. If you look at political philosophy, if you tell me you want power and I should hand you a vote, that is the contract, because you are telling me you do something for me.
The role of government, really, in ensuring day-to-day things.
Yes, it's a contract or a document that just highlights the things political parties want to do should they get power via an election from an electorate. So that's really what we mean when we talk about manifestos.
Have we always had the manifesto discussion, big thing, since our independent period, or it became a big thing really in the 1992 period all the way to today? Could you?
Well, if you look at 1992 till date, you've seen consistency, but previously we're not, to the best of my knowledge, and the elders watching can share more information. But I think we've been more consistent since 1992, where the two leading parties, at least, have been telling Ghanaians what their plans are and what they intend to do. But historically, we've had manifestos being done. For example, if you look at Nkrumah, when he wanted to lead the country, he spelled out his vision for Ghana. Vision when it comes to education, vision when it comes to infrastructure, vision when it comes to agric, vision when it comes to jobs, vision when it comes to housing, vision when it comes to railways. For example, in his manifesto, they wrote about how they wanted to expand the railway infrastructure, how they wanted to use railway to drive industrialization. So they've not been new to us. They've not been new to us. Manifestos are documents or written intentions of political parties and the things they want to do, and they usually come with an assessment of the situation. So fast forward to modern times, and based on our conversation last week on this show, at least John Mahama and Nana Akufo-Addo, if you look at when they entered parliament, you can say they are classmates in this particular 2020 race, because they've all been parliamentarians, they've all been ministers. Now one is a former president, one is a president, so they are classmates going into this particular election. Now, if you look at Mahama's first manifesto, he reviewed the situation we were in then, because he had taken over from a deceased president and talked about the situation in the country and how we had to forge ahead, even though we had seen a gloomy state when the former president Atamios died. If you look at Akufo-Addo's first manifesto, he analyzed the situation that then NDC government had taken Ghana, and said that the then government was taking us on a bad track, and that if we do not change, we won't get anything better. So look at some of the captions of the manifestos then. The NPP's 2012 manifesto, they wanted to transform lives and transform Ghana. And they said they will build a free, fair and prosperous society, because they were talking a lot about the economy, they were talking about corruption and related matters. So it's not been new, but now we are seeing consistency in the manifestos and more attention being given to the manifestos as an element of our electoral system.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to even go back to Nana Akufo-Addo now, because you mentioned his first manifesto. Nana Akufo-Addo's first manifesto was in 2008. Now, if you look at 2008, for example, and you look at 2012, or say 2004, 2008, and 2012, depending on where you stood on the divide, the manifesto either had the theme of continuity. So in 2004, J. Kufuor's manifesto was themed Positive Change 2. And then in 2008...
Because he had done with the 2000 elections and now moving to...
2008, the MPP's manifesto, then it was Nana Akufo-Addo who was leading the party, in his first attempt said, moving Ghana forward, building a modern Ghana. So he had taken over from J. Kufuor, whose 2 terms had run out, and Nana Akufo-Addo wanted the MPP to stay in power.
So do they couch these themes and all that around what they've developed from a previous one?
Yes. So you find that, for example, if you look at the long and short, for example, of the MPP's 2020 manifesto, is for more to do more. That's a caption, really. But if you look at it in its entirety, they talk about building Ghana, consolidating our gains, protecting the progress we've made, and going forward. Depending on where you are, if you are in power, the manifesto has a
you want to stay, so you want to push the continuity.
If you're on
thing.
the other side, you are punching holes in what government has done, and you are telling people that you have a better alternative. And that kind of theme has run through a lot of the manifestos from way back 2000, 2004 up until now, where we are heading into another election.
But do they really serve their purpose, these manifestos?
That's a really good question. On the Citi Breakfast Show, we've had this conversation where I personally have said that, look, if you look at the manifestos of the various political parties and what they end up doing, they do not really stick to their manifestos. And I made that statement based on my 30-something years on this earth as a Ghanaian. And if you really look at some of the things they say in the manifestos, because usually they give you a sense of the problem. So there's a bit of a problem statement and what we wish to do. You see certain things that are sometimes repeated in the manifestos, meaning that they have not been executed or they have not been executed well. And then you look at the resources that we have as a people and the fact that some of these things still live with us, and you would conclude that, well, the parties have not really lived up to their manifestos. So I think that going forward, we need to really look at what they say in their manifestos beyond the sloganeering.
We'll look at the check-in part, whether from us as citizens, from CSOs and all those people. But could you, if you're done with your answer on that, I want Nathan, you have been studying the manifestos, also tracking them and all that. Really, are they living up to, expectations with the manifesto? And if not, why has it become a big thing that now we're all on manifesto, and people, parties are calling press conferences just to talk about somebody's manifesto or what they're going to do in them? It's become a big thing.
I think I'll answer the question from that point and then go to whether or not they follow. Now, the reason why they've become big is that the documents provide a certain way of tracking what a party promises in an electoral period. So if I say that in this document I will do A, B, C, D, and E, for the next 4 years, if you have that manifesto, you can every day check what I'm doing and all of that. That's why they have become very huge, because now the citizenry will have a way of checking. And they've become huge for a second reason, because now the opposition also has a way of checking. Why? Because now most parties rule by manifesto, not by development plan, not by the constitution. That is why with every government you have, there's a certain iteration of the development plan. Everybody brings their own development plan tied into whatever they state in their manifesto. I think that even goes to answer the other question as to whether or not they follow. To a large extent, they try to follow. Because the government can say, we've done this and this. Yes, there are some promises that government have tried to implement. For example, free SHS. To a large extent, government has tried to implement. It has implemented to a point. Are there problems? There are problems. Planting for food and jobs. Yes, instead they will do so. One village, one dam. There are issues.
Somebody say the key things in there.
And they are the ones that form the basis of your manifesto or your campaign. But the tiny things, when you start to dig deeper into the documents and you find the smaller things under the big headings, then you start to realize that, wait a minute, there's a problem. They are not actually following. Either that, or they are either hamstrung, there's no money, or they just outrightly forget. And I'll give you an example. If you look at the MPP's 2012 manifesto and 2016 manifesto, right? Or the 2016 manifesto, sorry. They said they were going to develop a creative arts fund.
That's right.
Right? In the 2020 manifesto, it has reappeared almost 99% like that, in that same form.
Yeah.
So you wonder, how come this hasn't been done? How come this has gone on government's blind side? So to an extent, they do try to follow, but I think the general understanding we can all draw from this is that the big ticket items, because those are the ones that get the most attention, you find the government is pumping money, pumping effort, pumping resource into making sure that the big ticket things are done. And then the minor things that are supposed to be done are left undone. They are done to a point, or they are completely forgotten, and they keep reappearing in different shapes and forms in subsequent manifestos.
But how do we track? Could you come back to your issue that you wanted to raise about tracking? How do we track as citizens? And then CSOs and the likes, I mean, what more can they do to ensure that this manifesto that now we are saying that is what we're going to judge governments on are adhered to?
This is a big question, and it's something that we need to really address. If a government says they will do A, B, C, D, E, in fact, the first thing we must ask ourselves is is it what the people need?
Yes.
Right. Now, if a manifesto promise says they are going to build infrastructure ABC in maybe Doma,
That's right.
is it what Doma needs? If it's what Doma needs, how are we going to do it to benefit the people? How is it going to help the Doma economy to put profits in the people's pockets?
Yeah.
How are we going to do it such that we do not destroy the Doma environment? And what structures are there to ensure continuity of this project to be a long-term project to give the people the result? I think those are some of the questions we should be asking our leadership when they come and say, we want to do this, we want to do that, we want to do this. And then beyond that, we need to seek proper timelines on these manifestos, because sometimes if you are tracking manifesto promises and you say, oh, you said you do this, but you've not done it, politicians will get away and say, oh, we didn't say we'll finish it in our first term. We said we'll do it.
So vague, they're left open.
Give us a second term. So we must insist on timelines for execution of promises and plans and projects.
In every manifesto, so for example, if you say free SHS, is it within a year?
For example, let me give you this
years?
example. Both political parties, leading political parties, have promised an auditorium like the National Theatre in Kumasi.
That's right.
And this is not yesterday. They've been promising it since I used to work in Kumasi, and I've been in Accra for 7 years. Right? There's nothing like that. Now, when they promise, we then, who are the key stakeholders in that particular area, must ask for a timeline and an implementation plan, and we must track that. Beyond that, beyond key stakeholders tracking and all these things, there is something that we must also pay attention to: the national budget. Now, when the budget is read, when a government wins power and they read the budget gives you an idea of how they are going to implement the things that they said they will do. Now, at the end of every statement for every sector, the finance minister says, for projects so and so and so, the government has voted an amount of this for the execution of the programs and activities of this ministry. How often do we see annual reports from ministries, departments, and agencies? The various tracking and scientific institutions that can give us proper data on certain things. These days, you do not see data. So, for example, if this government says that planting for food and jobs has worked, it's up to us to go out into the market and do interviews. But which other independent organization is tracking the production of all these things to tell you that maize production used to be this, but now it's here? We used to have that. But now, that information is not publicly available, so we have to keep pushing and pushing to get some of these things. So NDC promises transparency, NPP promises transparency, CPP, PPP, all the parties. But when they get into office, the transparency doesn't become transparent. We see a lot of opacity in releasing the information for us to track the things they do. So these are essentials that we must know.
But how can we force them to give us that information that, I mean, that now, for example, we have now, you know, the infrastructure tracker now available. You had the NDC to come up with a website on corruption tracking and all that. But really, like you're saying, can you go with what they're saying till you go out there, you know, you're not sure what is really out there. But what can we do to force them to, you know, have an independent one so that we're sure of what we're getting?
Well, in Parliament, there is a Government Assurances Committee. That is one. So, for example, government assurances ensures that all promises made by the government are delivered. We need to resource that committee and give them more resources to do more, so that we can see that the promises being given are in fact delivered to us. Number two, procurement is one of the key things that runs this country. And that's government.
So procurement economy.
Look, governments practically do procurement. Yes, that's one of the key roles they play. So in the procurement area, we've seen the Public Procurement Authority. We must ask them to do more, so that if this road is going to be built here, this road in front of Citi FM, all the information should be publicly available. Engagement of the community should be there. We should see everything with our eyes, so that tomorrow, when an NDC comes to tell us maybe NPP built this road for $100 million, we have seen the documentation. We track. Is it true? Did the government pay this much for this? When an NPP also comes to tell us that, oh, NDC also did this, you see the documentation. If you've noticed, even with a very big infrastructure project, usually we have to rely on the speeches they give and the figures they put out. Sometimes inaccurate information is put out. So when you're tracking and doing comparison, you do not do a scientific job. So I feel that the various institutions that have been empowered by the Constitution, so set up by the Constitution, we need to resource them to do more. And then we as citizens, we need to forget about, yes, you can be an MPP person, NDC person, but in the end, the resources we are spending now should make your present better and consolidate your future. So this whole thing about my party is doing this, my party is, and we end up not being critical of our parties. We should begin being critical of our parties, because if they fail, they've not just failed you, they've also failed me, and they failed tomorrow's children. So I think those are some of the things that we can do, so that beyond the manifestos, beyond the sloganeering, we ask for sustainable development. Sustainable development. For example, if you're building boreholes for a community and you say, when your government comes, you build 1,000 boreholes, the boreholes should be in a place where the community can use it, where it can change their lives. It shouldn't be a borehole you go and build in a village, in a bush somewhere.
But what goes into their choosing of certain things? You know, earlier you were talking about the fact that sometimes they come up with things that really doesn't benefit the communities or the people they want to give. So, Nathan, you have been studying manifestos. Based on what do they say, okay, I'm going to come up with it, aside the fact that you have things that people say, well, I want ABCD, but the other things, the nitty-gritty, what goes into it?
It's very difficult to pinpoint what exactly goes into it, but a lot of it, from my reading and from asking around, I think it's just for political expediency, or for, how do I even say it, for electoral expediency. So you sit down and say, okay, I want to put 1,000 boreholes. Where are they going? Maybe they should go here, because maybe we have X number of votes coming here. We have a lot more of a presence here. Now, if we give them that, we are more assured of more votes from that part. That's one thing I've also discovered from my asking around and asking questions as to why some of these things happen. And I seem to get a lot of those kind of answers that, our people are there.
So they look at their strongholds and feed them.
You know, and places where they are sure that if I put this project here, it will benefit me politically, because the more votes I get, the greater my chances are of staying in power. And I think, we are talking about up and say, I want to write a 100-page manifesto. It should not be 100 pages of things you think the people need. It should be 100 pages of things the people themselves need. You know, so I think that's what should happen. You ask about CSOs, and CSOs like CDD, for example, in the last few months have been tasking political parties. They've been asking them that, do you speak to the citizenry? And they themselves have drawn areas where they feel, you know, they've gone to do their own interviews, they've asked questions, and they feel that political parties need to look at these areas and start to input these queries into their manifestos, so that the manifestos will be all-encompassing and will benefit people. I hear, and from inside info, that the NDC, when they were trying to put this manifesto that we'll hear later, I hear they went around seeking opinions. Yes, they went around asking questions, and all of that fed into their manifesto. Let's just hope that when it comes out, it will reflect the needs of our time. It's not anything that is fancy or is great sounding, and it will get you into power, and once you get there, you forget about everybody and then go back to sleep. It should be a document that should feed into the needs of the people. It should plug into the current context, and like Ojo is saying, consolidate the future and make the present better. So I feel that political parties will have to start thinking a lot more about where people need their problems solved, and not where they think the people need their problems solved, or where they think that, if we put this here, it will work for us. I feel that the conversation needs to go above that.
Have we gotten to the point where now we're judging governments or political parties based on their manifesto, or based on the real things they've done on the ground?
I think we are seeing both. For example, the NPP is in government, so let's use them. They promised free senior high school. They promised one district, one factory. They promised the IPEP, that is the infrastructure for poverty eradication. And they promised to make the economy stronger. Because before they came into office, Baumia was talking about fundamentals. And if you listen to the MPP's manifesto launch, they said now the fundamentals of our economy are stronger, we are firmer, and even in the face of COVID, we look like we've done the right things to keep us going. So the MPP mentioned that. So we've marked them based on their performance in that particular area. Free senior high school is something that we've all been looking at and assessing the government performance on, because it was a big talking point for them. If you remember, at a point, there used to be this joke that you ask the MPP, what are you going to fix sanitation? Oh, free senior high school. What are you going to...
Everything was free. Yeah.
So it's something that they promised, and it's something we are looking at. One district, one factory. It was a promise, so it's being tracked. One village, one dam was a promise. Planting for food and jobs was a promise. So those things are being tracked. Then we also look at our everyday lives and what should be done to make our everyday lives better.
Okay.
So if I wake up in the morning and I do not have water, if I wake up in the morning and, for example, COVID hits, if the government is not managing it right, we'll assess the government's performance also based on that, because it's an existential problem, and the government in office should be able to manage it. So we are assessing them on both things, what they promised and what they must do. And NDC, when they were coming into office, they also promised, they were assessed based on some of the things they promised and what they wanted to do. If you remember, when John Mahama was running for presidency after the death of Professor Mills, one of the things he was mentioning was schools under trees, and that was a big topic back then, and was in their manifesto. So we marked his performance also based on schools under trees. Corruption, it was marked because he promised to also be transparent. So it's a two-way thing. We weigh the things you promise and the things you must do, and we expect that we deliver across board.
Okay, Nathan.
Yeah, but of course, and it's because when you come into power, you cannot, for example, predict what will happen. It's not an easy ride from the beginning of your term to the end, where you envisage that there won't be any other problem. So I'm going to take this manifesto and execute 1 to 20. There will be issues like COVID, for example. COVID-19 was a major test, and it's still a major test to a lot of government. So when people are going to vote, they will think about how government handled COVID-19. The poor and vulnerable, were they touched? Were they affected positively? Were they shielded from the economic impacts of COVID-19, of the lockdown, of all the things that happened? How prepared were we as a country? Did we even have enough health infrastructure to ensure that when something like this happened, we could at least respond first and then augment the numbers later? Those are the things that will determine a lot of the votes. Of course, there's this other side where the manifesto is the guiding principle, and Dr. Baumia and these people have brought out their website where you can go and check the tracker and all of that. So it goes both ways. You will be judged per the manifesto, but you'll be judged based on the daily problems you are able to solve. Because for somebody who cannot relate to the manifesto, the person can relate to their daily problems. When they wake up in the morning, do they have money in their pockets? Can they go and buy cocoa and kosi and watch it to eat?
Everyday thing.
If they can't, then there's a problem. And I remember asking the finance minister when I met him in Cape Coast. Yes, I asked him that, what was he going to tell? How was he going to tell his story to Ghanaians who wake up in the morning and don't have money and all of that? So those are the two things political parties have to grapple with. What is on their hands in terms of the manifesto, but the daily problems Ghanaians go through that they have to fix because they've been handed, they've signed that part of the contract that says that I'm taking your vote and I will try and make life better for you.
But now it also appears that there's always some element that gets a manifesto, popular. So for example, the MPP, we had the free SHS. Now we don't know whether the Okada thing will be in in the manifesto of the NDC when it's launched today, but that is also getting some attention. Prior to that, there have been big things that, is that a deliberate thing in choosing, some of these things that get our attention?
I think it's part deliberate. Sometimes it's accidental. Sometimes accidental. And I say accidental because, for example, if you remember the 1D1F and how it started. If you remember, it wasn't really part of the MPP's big plans, but as they went on campaign, it was something that emerged, and then it caught on, and now they had to try and put together a policy document to back it, and eventually they tried to implement. There are some which are absolutely thought through, like positive change in the year 2000. I remember that phrase, and I was bored, but I still remember, I still resonated. And there was this van that would early morning in the neighborhood, weekends, be driving around making noise. And it was huge. It was huge. And then you had the very famous Mills, I Care For You, those type of things. So some of the themes, even though you have a document that is 200 pages, 150 pages, 90 pages, whatever, there's always one big thing that stands out for you. And
it's like football.
Elections have been won or lost based on those themes.
It's like football. You have 11 players on the pitch. They are all playing their roles, but there's your star man. So at Barcelona, you have your Messi. In the Black Stars, you have your Thomas Partey or your Dede Ayew or Asamoah Gyan. So there are the other things, but there is the big ticket item that you can easily communicate, one. You can get people emotional about, two. And you think that this thing, when you do it, you can change people's life and you can get people's buying. So those will be pushed a lot, and then the others will be communicated as and when they are asked specific questions.
And I also think it's because I think political parties realize that some of these long, chunky themes can't really hit the electorate at the bottom of the pyramid. So you find, the positive change, like the year 2000, positive change is one. And then 2008, the MPP's theme was moving Ghana forward. And then all kinds of things, better Ghana agenda, the NDC in 2012. So even though you have a large document, you also think of what hits home. What will resonate with the voter, what will the market woman hear and quickly understand. That's why I have all these nice 4 more for Nana, 4 more to do.
Very interesting ones, So you can send us a message. The hashtag is Voters Diary. You can send us via Twitter or Facebook, or you can send us via WhatsApp on the number on the screen. Guys, I want us to narrow it a bit to the NDC because today they are launching their manifesto. Of course, we don't want to preempt what will be in there, but their flag bearer has been campaigning, making a lot of promises and all that. 2 things is catching everybody's attention. One to do with legalizing Okada, the other to do with the free, healthcare bit. I want us to go on the campaign and then pick some of the things he's been saying, and then we'll come and look at these things. So let's start, if we can, with the one to do with the free healthcare.
All funds that have been locked up with the collapsed financial institutions. Within our first year in office, we shall pay to all the beneficiaries all funds locked up in the collapsed financial institutions. It is a promise. We shall not put together any long-term payment plan that will further worsen the living conditions of the victims. As has been introduced in other economies, the next NDC administration will establish a financial services authority that will be responsible for ensuring that consumer financial markets work for consumers and providers and for the economy as a whole. This financial services authority will oversee all financial products and services that are offered to consumers and will effectively and efficiently prevent and stop the challenges that have confronted customers of Men's Gold, DKM, and others. We will restore Ghanaian indigenous investment in the banking and financial sector. And we will do this through a tiered banking structure in order to restore viable credit sources for Ghanaian SMEs. And we will make amends for those whose businesses were collapsed due to political victimization. We will send all contractors with valid contracts who have been sitting at home for 4 years without being paid for legitimate work done for government back to site. And we will make immediate arrangements to pay them their hard-earned monies deliberately withheld by the Nanado administration due to politics. Ladies and gentlemen, weak infrastructure does not propel growth and improvement in the quality of the lives of people. And this is precisely why my presidency took aggressive steps to develop and consolidate our healthcare infrastructure, our educational infrastructure, our transport infrastructure, and our digital infrastructure, This is how to build a resilient nation. Without creating and consolidating a developed infrastructure, no nation, and I say, can resist the global shocks that come from time to time. Just imagine for a second how Ghana would have been without the University of Ghana Medical Center. Without the Ghana East District Hospital, as the number of COVID-19 cases keep rising in our country. The speed of building and consolidating our infrastructure has slowed down because the current government is largely ignoring the infrastructural buffers that are needed to build resilience in the face of external shocks. The NDC believes in Ghana's future and will address the issues that affect you, each and every one of us. We'll build a peaceful, secure, and strong economy that provides sustainable jobs through a transformed, industrialized, and digital economy. We'll reinforce the independence of state institutions, such as the Electoral Commission, such as the Auditor General's Department, such as IOCO, and the Commission for Human Rights and Administrative Justice. Single-source procurement, popularly called sole sourcing, will be the exception rather than the rule. In pursuance of social justice, I'll vigorously push through a constitutional review that creates a fairer and just emolument system and removes the distortions between Article 71 office holders and other public sector employees. We will, as part of an Integrity for Development Action Plan, launch what I call Operation Sting. Operation Sting will be an anti-corruption crusade which under my watch will involve massive, far-reaching and practical government reform. It will be a ruthless system that fights against all corrupt political appointees and public sector workers.
So that's ex-President John Mahama on some promises he's already making on his. Before I come back to you guys, I want us to go to another promise he's making, which is gaining a lot of traction, to do with whether Okada should be legalized or not. Let's quickly watch this one and then we'll come back and look at that. So that's ex-President Mahama on his Okada thing. Nathan, what? You're smiling.
Oh, I'm just smiling because of the kind of reaction that has followed this. And I find it interesting that, you know, the same person who signed the law that abolished the commercial thing or the Okada thing says he wants to look at it again, review, regulate should he get the chance to be president once again. You know, when you look at such promises, I think that some of the promises that are made depending on where they are and who they are speaking to. And I think, if memory serves, when he made this promise, he was at a place where, for example, the use of motorbikes for commercial purposes was a big thing. So you can understand how and why he would make such a promise. So I don't know. We don't know whether it will be captured in the NDC's manifesto. I don't know how that will be captured. I really, really want to know how that will be captured, because the end game is job creation. That is really the end game of this. Yeah. So how will they capture this under job creation tied to all the other things they may possibly say, you know, that will come under job creation, i.e. maybe more teachers getting employed, more agric extension officers, more people getting into public sector, private sector being enabled to employ more people, and then there will be this. I'm really waiting to see how that will be captured as part of the job creation initiative. But you can understand, in these times when you go around and you see the problems people live in and live with, then you are pushed to to make a promise, whether or not at that point you've already thought through and you know what you're
comes
saying.
to your earlier assertions by the two of you about giving to the people what they're really looking for and not what you think they need.
I've seen some posts on social media by key people in the NDC communications team explaining further this Okada promise and breaking things down. One of the reasons to create jobs, to ensure people in the rural areas get to move around, the delivery system, and so all sorts of reasons are being given for this. Now, whether it will come in the manifesto or not, I don't know, but I want to assume it will come. This is the reason. The NDC government, when they were in office, oversaw a transport sector which to me was not well managed. Let me give you an example. The rapid bus transit system, which we are taking loans for. We bought buses, parked the buses, we took a lot of noise making, downgraded to QBS, and then it was rolled out into the system. And as we speak, majority of the buses are still parked. So they may want to address Ghanaians on that particular thing in their manifesto and tell us that they can manage the transportation sector better, or they've learned their lessons. You understand? So even Okada, this government, this NDC government that wants to come back, made it legal, right? They passed the law. Now they want to make it legal. So have they learned their lessons? Maybe something, it's a message they may want to push through the system that, well, we've learned our lessons from A, B, C, D, and when we come, we'll do it better. But there's something running through all the things that presidential candidates are saying and what the parties are saying. Big budgets items. NDC wants to do
$10 billion push.
$10 billion, the big push.
Yeah, the big push.
NPP wants to do the 100 billion Citi cares projects.
Plus agenda 111.
Yes, that is the hospitals.
Yes, the health
Now, the 111 hospitals, back of the envelope calculations that we have done suggest that we are not going to spend less than $2 billion on that. So we are looking at big tickets items which would require a lot of money. So I am expecting a very good debate on government revenues too, and protecting the national purse, the public debt and revenue. So there are two things. How to get more revenue to deliver all these promises. The NDC says that the CARES project, the 100 billion Ghana City project, a third of the funding will come from central government, 2/3 will be sourced from private sector. So how they are going to do that from private sector, that's yet to be known. And how the government is going to get more revenue. They've given us a sense of how they are going to do that. And in the next 4 years, if NPP wins, we will see whether we can sow what we've reaped. You remember the digitization agenda?
Yes.
The PIN, the TIN, national ID, what do you call it? Property addresses
and all that.
If the NPP wins, we'll know in their second term how we are going to benefit a lot more, because by then, national ID would have matured, a lot of these things would have matured, and then we should start getting a lot of returns. If we don't get it, then we know that those things have not been well executed. Now, if the NDC beats the NPP and they come, how are they also going to ensure we get the right amount of revenue to ensure this big push is done? The infrastructure drive, look, Eastern Corridor Road projects, this, that. How are they going to do that? Are both parties going to ensure that the PPP acts that we put in place, are they going to ensure that the public-private partnership system we put in place, we are going to get the most benefit so that we reduce our public debts? How are we going to manage this?
Should the revenue bid now be part of the promises that they are making and spelled out in detail, not vaguely, and then, oh, we're going to do, you know.
You need to tell the people of Ghana how you are going to get money to fund these things. If the money will come from taxation, then people know, then they will make a decision. Do we want to get taxed more now so we can benefit later, or we don't want to get taxed at all? How are you going to generate it? Is it more road tolls? Are you going to manage, for example, all the collections we make from road tolls better? Are you guarding the purse better in terms of the taxes that come in? Are you finding ways and means of generating money? Are you going to borrow? I think it is important that the party state where the money will come from.
Because usually you don't see that. And then when they attempt to implement, for example, the free SHS, where we're taking some of the money from the oil, it became a big thing. I'm thinking that and I think they shy away because of the likely, backlash they'll face from where they're taking the money from. But we should now insist that should be part of it. Right?
I think that the NPP and the NDC, they are in a very good position to do revenue projections, okay, and give us a sense of where we are going to get the money to fund whatever we want to do. Because the NDC has been in government within this republic. It's been just between NDC and NPP. Kufuor had 8 years, and Mills Mahama did 8 years. So together 16 years. Rawlings 92, 96, 8 years. Mills Mahama 8 years, so 16 years. Now Kufuor also had 8 years. Akufo-Addo has had 4 years. You add it, you are looking at 12 years. 12 years and 16 years is enough for any party to still have their contacts and to still have their data and the models to be able to do revenue projections for us to know this thing we want to do, we'll get money from here or we are going to borrow. If it's the MPP's Ghana beyond aid and we are not going to borrow or we are not going to take a lot of aid, how are we going to run? The 1D1F projects we've done, what returns are we going to see? You see, all those things gives us the assurance that our politicians know where they are going to get the resources to deliver the projects and the development so that we won't have to go back to HIPIC. Because now, when the debates begin, it's possible you hear Adongo and Fifi Kwete and the NDC's finance communication team talking about debt to GDP.
Then you have
Dr. Bawumia and his team will also come and also tell you debt to GDP, this and this. So whilst we are waiting for that debate and everything, we should also know, because they all have the men. So they should be able to tell us where we are getting the money from, the revenue projections and all those things, to give us the assurance that our leaders know what they are talking about, not just the grand plan of spending 10 billion for the big push, 100 billion for
that we don't even know where really they are getting that.
And some of these things also help with clarity and they don't create doubt. For example, if you follow all the conversations, for example, the Ejapa royalties deal, a lot of the responses from government is that, oh, we need money to do infrastructure, we need money to do this, we need money to do that. Great, it is true, government does need money, and that's a fact. But you see, for example, if government had stated that, okay, this is what we are going to do, we are going to create a special purpose vehicle and, work in tandem with resources, leverage, create money, and then I think that it would sync better with the electorate from the beginning than halfway through the journey. Now you figure out, wait, we don't actually have the money. We need to find a way of generating the money. It's those things that leave people very unsure, really, and they look at government suspiciously and say, okay, so did you really have an idea or you didn't have a plan? So I think it's important that the parties need to tell everybody where we are getting the money from, how we are generating revenue to sponsor all these big ticket things. Because for a country like Ghana, spending, for example, $10 billion on infrastructure is huge. Looking at all the problems we have, trying to do Agenda 111, which per Kojo's numbers will cost us about $2 billion, is huge. Looking at all the struggles we have, people not getting water, not enough lights, women are dying when they go to give birth, we've got bad roads, children are still not getting chalk and light and things in their classrooms, and we still want to try these things. We should have a clear idea of where the money is coming from, and then I feel that the electorate will be in a better position to decide where they want to go.
Okay, let's look at NDC, that's 2016 manifesto, and then later we'll look at what to expect for this. What were the big things at the time they spoke about, and with our tracking system, what really came out of that manifesto?
NDC's 2016 manifesto. Well, maybe I should read some lines. So they spoke about basic education, they spoke about all the things that they had done, and then they promised to build on what had been done. So for example, they said we are going to eliminate schools under trees. Back then, the estimate was that there were about 40,000 schools under trees. Was that done? Largely, we've not seen the existence of a lot of schools under trees.
No, there's still quite a number, especially
Yes, you will get a good number.
If you look at the Ghana education facts and figures, you realize that we saw schools added on.
Okay.
There was a target of some 6,000 CHIPS compounds back then, because back then we had just about 345 or so CHIPS compounds. By the time they were leaving, we had in excess of 3,000 CHIPS compounds. Even though the nation has not hit the 6,000 targets yet, you would say they did some work.
If you look at, for example, the day SHSs,
yes,
their target was 200. I think they did less than a quarter.
Okay. Yes.
You know.
So all those things were promised and they were delivered to a certain extent, not completely. Now there was also the bit about even the economy itself, consolidating the economy. And if you look at what has happened in the past 4 years with the banking sector crisis, if you look at what has happened with the related issues, you'd ask questions. Did they manage the economy well? Did they manage the financial sector well? Because it's one of the key drivers of the economy. They mentioned the energy sector and the fact that we had been in Dumso and they had invested enough and they had abolished Dumso and that power was going to be stable. If you look at how it's been since the NPP took over, we've not gone to the Dumso times, how we had to do 48 hours, 24 hours, and all those things. They promised water. For example, at Delta areas, they didn't have Ghana water, but now those places have water. So they made a lot of promises. They delivered some of the promises to some extent. There are some of the promises they couldn't. For example, on corruption, they said a lot about corruption and fighting corruption. But we also realized that in certain instances, public funds had not been spent as it was supposed to be spent. Now, this government also promised a similar thing.
Okay.
Talking about projects being bloated in certain instances and all that. But we've also seen that there are certain projects done by this government, which if you look at the statements they made in opposition and you compare with what is being done and the cost. So it's something that we must do. And there's an important point to be made here. Look, when it comes to infrastructure and assessment, the Ghana Institution of Surveyors, the surveying division, the Quantity Surveying Division, the Ghana Institution of Engineers, I think we as the media must start tasking them. Because in 2016, we got a Ghana Infrastructure Scorecard. We should be getting another Ghana Infrastructure Scorecard right now. And they are the professionals, the technocrats. So that at all times, we have some work down, they did some interchanges, they got some contracts.
Terminal 3.
Fufu Susola Road, all those things. But the Eastern Corridor Road was done in bits and pieces, so it wasn't delivered. And this government has also not delivered that. So they did some, they didn't do some. And we are waiting for their manifesto.
Your thoughts on the 2016?
Yeah, like Ojo said, they listed a number of things they wanted to do. Most of them were things they had started or had done some work on in 2020. So I mentioned the SHSs, for example. Terminal 3 was big for them because it was a good part of it was done at that time. Of course, it was completed now. It's working. Everybody's enjoying Terminal 3 when you travel around. There were other things that were not done. Kojo mentioned the transport sector, and it's true. Ayalolo was in a bit of a mess. Again, if you look at, for example, tourism, where they said they were going to complete the construction of the National Science and Technology Museum, that's not being done. The construction is. It's not this, in this time. Everybody drives past it. It's on the Barnes Road somewhere. It's not been done properly. If you look at redesigning the Ifwa Sutherland Park, for example, based on the Ratway Park, if you look at the Ifwa Sutherland Park as it is, it's just really, really not worked. If you look at other things like sports infrastructure, for example, and that's an area I'm quite familiar with. Big plans, not a lot of them happen. Build new stadia in Upper East, Upper West, Volta, Eastern Brongahafu. Not a lot of those things happen. It's now that you have some of these things that are popping up because the sports minister has led a drive to build those youth and sports centers around 5,000 seater and all of that. So several things were promised, some were achieved, to be fair, and you have to be fair. Some were not done. And I think that not being able to fulfill some of those promises, plus the burdens of the period and the kind of things the NDC found itself in, also culminated in they are losing power, and then you have to see you see what the NPP has also done between 2016 and now, and they're asking for 4 more years in power. So if you go through the manifesto, you find that there were things that they had started in 2012 or 2013 up until 2016, and they had plans of continuing. but because they were out of government, they could not continue. And maybe the expectations, if you listen to the former president, John Mahama, and some of the things he's saying, you can find the linkages, you can find that they still have unfinished business. Some of the things they feel they want to come and continue. They said complete, for example, they say complete Eastern Corridor roads. So clearly they realize that didn't work. And if you remember his trip to the Volta region, where he stated that, look, if they had their own way, they would have finished. They couldn't finish. They want to come back to finish. It just tells you that they do recognize the missing bits of their own plan, and they have plans of trying to finish should they get re-elected into power.
Okay, we have a few minutes to go, but the manifesto, 2020 manifesto of the NDC will be launched in a few hours.
Yeah.
What are we likely to see? I know it's a difficult one because, you know, we've not seen. But, I mean, based on what we've been hearing on the campaign, based on what happened in 2016, and knowing, you know, connecting that usually it continues or it segues into the next manifesto, what are some of the big things or areas you believe that they'll be touching on?
I think job creation is important.
Okay.
I think that's where I suspect, and I could be wrong, I think that's where the Okada thing could fall. And job creation. I think infrastructure will be huge because you see the NDC likes to tout itself as a party that likes to do big things in terms of infrastructure. They would like to point to certain things and say, we build this, we build that, and all that, the green book and all of that. So I get the sense that the $10 billion push thing will be heavy, and I think we'll see a lot more clarity into how it will happen. I also think this financial sector bit about paying, you know, the people whose monies have been locked up, I get the sense it will appear, I could be wrong, because you heard the ex-president say it. Now, if it will appear, how will it be captured? How do they have a plan? Will they give us a proper plan on how they want to pay those people? Because whether you like it or not, it will play a key part in this year's election. Somebody who's aggrieved and has 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 CDs locked up and does not know the way forward. If you provide the person a bit of a solution, you could be swaying the person. So I'd love to see if the NDC will capture it in any shape or form in their manifesto. For me, those are the things I'd want to see. Of course, I'd want to see the NDC's response to the MPP's plan of rent and giving people soft loans to pay rent advance, because it's also very huge. So I'd want to see what the NDC has to say to Ghanaians in response to the MPP's promise of giving people soft loans and making sure that people have greater access to housing in a far less stressful manner than things are now.
Okay, so you're looking at job creation, the financial sector, and the housing, infrastructure and housing. Kojo, what are you expecting to see?
Well, basically, I think we're all looking in the same bottle. For example, job creation. Former President Mahama mentioned Okada and said job creation, right? We've heard something about TVET, free TVET. There's free senior high school who wants to do free TVET to tool the youth to get better jobs. He's also mentioned free senior high school that we will abolish the double track. I think we'll hear a lot of NPP is doing this, but we'll do it this way. I think that's what we are going to see, because there are some things that I do not think the NDC will say they will abolish. For example, free senior high school. They will not say they will abolish, but they will say we will do it this way, especially with double track that they say they are going to abolish it.
Yeah. I
do not see the NDC saying, oh, one district, one factory is not a good idea. I foresee them saying something which is a similar policy, but a different program or a different plan to implement it. I hear of roads. I do not see the NDC saying, no, we don't need roads. You know, there was a time the campaign was like, what are they roads maybe? May mention say we'll do more roads, but maybe we'll use more local labor and we'll not go for stuff like Sino Hydro. That is what I'm going to see, because I do not see any party saying something really different from what we are seeing, because now they all seem to be understanding that there should be a framework we should work in, but how to develop the end result is what maybe we'll hear some differences or see some differences.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. Nathan Kwao, head of research here at Citi TV and Citi FM, and Kojo Akotobwat, head of new media here at Citi FM and Citi TV. Remember, we'll be covering live the NDC's launch of its manifesto. We'll be back at 6 p.m. to look at that and look at matters arising from that manifesto launch. Thank you very much for joining us. We return tomorrow. My name is Vivian Kai Lokko. Goodbye. You're welcome to the Upside Down Show. Whoa, but hold on.